Hello, everyone. Derek Floyd here, Beautiful Now Podcast. Welcome to a special edition of Beautiful Now Live. This is the segment where we interview special guests who have walked through certain things. They want to share their story with you to encourage you, to let you know, hey, that whatever you're going through, you can get there too. And today is a really, really personal one for me. So I hope that you have taken the time to sit back and relax and enjoy this incredible interview with a young man who started a ministry about absentee fathers. Wow. We're going to get into that one in just a second. But before we get started, do me a favor. As always, if you love the content you see here, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button right now. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that big red subscribe button. And most importantly, if you really enjoy it, hit the little bell next to it. That lets me get the most updated content to you as soon as it's available. And as always, we want you to just hit the share button because we want everybody to be uplifted, encouraged, and inspired. Now today, as I mentioned, I've got an incredible special guest who I met recently who started a ministry called The Father Effect. And The Father Effect is about talking about absentee fathers and the effect that it has on the children that have walked through that space. And believe me, I understand it because unfortunately, I was an absentee father in some of my days. And I've learned so much from listening to this man and how he's guided his life and what he's talked about and how he's learned how to guide others through what could be a painful process along the way. So if you have a few moments and you really maybe think about maybe this could be you, maybe you're the child that's walked through an absentee father, hit that share button and let's welcome our good friend, Mr. John Lynch. John, are you there for me, my friend?
I am, brother. Thanks for having me, man. You know what? I knew I liked you, but for you to call me a young man, I really like you.
You are a young man. You're younger than me, so there you have it. Man,
Yeah.
I'm so glad you're here.
Dude. I appreciate this, man. I appreciate the opportunity to share the story and all that God's doing, man. It's I tell people all the time, I'm just a lucky dude to be on the bus he's driving, that's for sure.
That is for sure, man. That is for sure. Well, we just met recently. Like, how many weeks ago did we meet?
It's only probably been maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. Yeah, through Kevin Colby, our good friend. He's a
Yeah.
stud. I love that guy.
He's a great guy. Kevin, shout out to Kevin. You're doing great. You got to look at Kevin's YouTube page. If you're not looking out, you got to make sure you see Kevin. We'll put that at the end of the page so you can check out Kevin. Yeah, man. He said, you got to talk to my guy, John. He's got a great story. And I thought, well, who's this John guy? And then we ended up talking, and man, I didn't even know that I knew I had walked through some absentee father pain and father wounds. I didn't know what they were until I watched your program and understood what that was all about. I mean, here's a snippet of, the father effect, forgiving my father and what you talked about and some of the things that you expressed on your website, the father effect. Man, you know what? Can we just talk about what the father effect is? Can you give me a little bit about what the whole thing's about?
Sure. I coined the term back in 2010 when I started the ministry and God started trying, really doing his transformation and work in my life. And, the basic idea behind it is really trying to help men, dads, walk in daily awareness of the impact by what they say and what they do. So whether that's the words they use with their kids, the actions, right? All the kids need affirmation, affection. They need that from their father, and even how you're modeling with your wife, right? How you're loving your wife is how your daughter is going to expect to be loved, and it's how your son is going to expect to love his wife. So it's a combination of things, but the simplicity of it all comes down to it's the lifelong influence that we have on our kids and what we say and do every day.
Wow. I mean, when I watched the movie, that's what really impacted me. And there was a 14-minute trailer version, so I suggest anybody out there that if you haven't seen the film, because he did a film on this, there's a 14-minute nice condensed version of what it's about, and then there's the full hour. And this film is free, right? Talk about why it's free.
Yeah, so we released it back in December, I think it was 2016. EWTN, which is the Global Catholic TV Network, they had approached us and said, hey, can we show it? And so we signed a non-financial deal with them, and they show it about 2 or 3 times a year. Matter of fact, we just re-upped with them for another 4 years. So we released it, and man, it's just been amazing what God's done with it. And it'll be 2 years this June. We released it on Father's Day for free on YouTube, and that came about just as the film had been out there for about 4 years or so, and it was just God saying, "Hey, let me have this thing and let me do my thing." Right?
Wow.
Let's release it for free on YouTube, and let God do His thing. So that's kind of really how it all came about with it being free on YouTube.
Well, after I watched your story, I was so touched. And I thought, man, what made this guy share this story this way? Because it's pretty gripping what happened to you. Can you give him a little bit about your story and how this got started?
Sure. So, I was 41 years old, and had achieved what I believed in my own mind was the pinnacle of success. I was a traveling salesman, making pretty good money, but at the same time, I wasn't the guy I needed to be at home. I wasn't the husband, the man, the father I needed to be. And God really just took me to a place of brokenness. My dad had committed suicide back when I was 11 years old. And so for 30 years, literally 30 years, I was an angry dude. Now, you would have never known it by looking at me because I'm pretty jolly and, upbeat and everything. But underneath, I just had this anger, and I was medicating the anger with alcohol. And so really there was this perfect storm. I was doing very well from a business perspective, traveling all over the country, had an unlimited expense account, which means, I was walking into bars, buying a round of drinks for the whole bar. I mean, it was
You were that
insanity.
guy.
I was that, yeah. And yeah. And I was the good time Johnny. I was the dude. It was the wilder, crazier stuff you could do. That was me. And so part of that, as I came to realize, was I was dying for affirmation. I grew up without a dad walking alongside me, telling me, showing me I was a good son. I had what it takes. All of the things that every young man needs, but I didn't get because my father wasn't there. And so I was just dying for affirmation from anybody, any way, right? And so I was that knucklehead, the guy that was just stupid drunk and just doing stupid things. And so literally back in 2009, February, God just took me to this place of brokenness. And it's where He had to take me because I was having too much fun running from Him. And I just had several things happen, really, again, the perfect storm of my life. I had some health issues. My marriage was falling apart. I just wasn't the guy I needed to be, and the guy God created me to be. And so in that moment, I realized, okay, there's this idea, this father wound that I had been introduced to a couple of years before this, with a friend of mine on a golf course. And we were having this conversation, and I was sharing with him some of the things I was struggling with. And at one point, he turned to me and said, "You grew up without a father, didn't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I did." And I went on to give him this great 10-minute explanation about how amazing my mom is. And she is. She is an angel on this earth. To this day, she is an amazing lady.
Shout to
And
mom. Shout to mom.
shout to mom for sure. And so after I got done, he turned to me and he said, "But was she a dad?" And that's the first time that had ever been said to me. And so I remember leaving the golf course, and I always thought I was kind of this abnormal, weird dude, like I had this thing, and that everybody else had this father thing figured out and this husband thing, and all these other dudes knew what they were doing, but I was the only knucklehead that didn't, right? And so, and that's what the enemy tends to want us to believe. And
I
so,
was in the Knucklehead Club. I was part two, vice president. I was there.
yeah, yeah, and yeah. As we get into it, dude, the guys I run into, it's crazy. The big message, I think, and we'll talk about a little bit more, is you're not alone. As I began to share my own story, coming out of that, man, everybody I talked to had a father story, and so literally, I walked away from the golf course that day, still thinking I was prideful, thought I could man up, suck it up, figure it out on my own. And so still a couple of years went by, and you can't. It just is impossible to do this on your own. And so literally February 20th of 2009, I tell, that was really my day of total surrender to God. And it was in the midst of that he started this incredible transformation. I started going to seeing a Christian counselor, Dr. Tom, and he loved me and encouraged me, but he called me out on all my junk when he knew I was lying. and
Yeah, you need
told me
that person to
the
call
truth.
you out.
Absolutely. And that was him, dude. And so I was there for about 3 or 4 months, and it was in the midst of one of those counseling sessions that I didn't hear God's voice verbally, but it was just this impression of how can you be so bitter, resentful, and angry towards a man who didn't know how to be a father. And that was it. It was for me, and every man's journey is different, and how forgiveness plays out in their life, and all of that's different. But for me, I had begun to understand. I had begun to ask my mom and uncles and all these other people questions about my dad because I didn't know him. I was 11 when he died, right? And the more I came to understand, here was the pivotal moment. And this is what I tell everybody is the most critical moment for me in forgiveness is understanding my dad could not give what he did not have. So my father, as I began to understand more about his life, he never had a stable father figure. He was dropped off at the age of 16 to live on his own in the middle of New Orleans. At 16 years of age, his mom just left with her fifth husband, a truck driver, and said, "Hey, have a good life." And so,
Fifth
long
husband,
story
huh?
short,
Wow.
yeah,
Ouch.
yeah. So it's just a crazy story, but that's the stuff I didn't know. As I began to understand that, I was like, God helped me to start to connect the dots. And this man that I had referred to as a coward and many other things, which I probably shouldn't say
It's a
beforehand.
PG show, bro.
Now,
Easy.
yeah,
Easy.
exactly.
Save those for the other show.
Now I look at the guy, I think of him, and I have nothing but compassion and love because of the forgiveness God shown me for my father. And again, understanding really didn't have a chance, man. He didn't have a chance, didn't know how to be a dad. And all that anger and resentment and everything I had towards him, God lifted that burden. And that's what radically changed my life as a man, husband, and father.
Oh my goodness, that's powerful. That's powerful. As I sit back and think, and those people that know me know, unfortunately, I had an absentee father whom I love dearly now, and our relationship is growing every day. We talk. I live near him now, which is awesome. But he wasn't in my space early, and what was I think probably the most thing that I really regret is that I walked out some of his steps. I wasn't in my children's life the way I need to be. And so you unfortunately follow some of that out when you're not taught. He wasn't taught, so then I wasn't taught. So it just, the generations keep going, right?
Yeah, the generational curse it's so devastating to so many people. And I know a lot of men like yourself. It's interesting. Even me at 41 years old, when all this started to happen to me, I remember thinking I'll never be like my dad. He was always gone. He was never there. And wasn't engaged, involved, whatever. And I remember like diligently thinking, I will never be like my dad. I'm going to be the opposite of my dad, if anything else, right? Well, at 41 years old, I turn around, I'm like, crud, I'm just like my dad, And I know men today, grown men that are my age in their 50s, that it's interesting. They're good friends of mine. And I know their stories of the hate and everything they have toward their father growing up and through high school and college and everything else. And I look at them now and they don't see it, but they're doing the exact same thing to their son. They've turned into their dad, the man that they hated so
The one
badly.
they hated the most, man. And
Yeah.
you don't even realize
and
it.
yet, And yet they're doing it through their kids. And it's sad and it's tragic. And that's kind of why we do what we do. It's raising that awareness and helping guys hopefully connect the dots to understand, man, God's got so much planned for your life, and he intends and wants you to be the father he created you to be. And so it's an amazing journey for sure.
And there's people that are shouting out to you here in the audience. Beth Floyd said, let me put hers on the screen. She says, wonderful grace, as we all children looked at our parents' story to help understand why they were. Thank you so much for sharing yours. I mean, it really does become that grace that we didn't know we needed, but now you go, wow. You didn't know your parents went through that. You always assume that they just come out perfect out of the factory, like they know what to do, right? But that's not how it works. And we have to find that grace for each other and for our parents to be able to even move forward and then to do better. You know, like I said earlier, my dad and I are so much better now. And for a while, I was really angry with him, but now love him to pieces, and I've learned a lot about him, and he's a great man, and I'm trying to do better to make him proud. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I,
the grace, for us, I think, and especially in the society and in the world we live in with social media and everything else, it's just so many are tempted to just jump on the bandwagon or the mob mentality or whatever. And we've got to get back to the idea of understanding real grace, right? It's how can we expect to get grace from God if we're not giving to our kids? And even when our kids mess up and make mistakes, right? And as difficult as that is, as painful it is to see them make mistakes, and you tell them, give them advice, and they don't take your advice, right? Knowing that good things aren't going to happen, it's still, man, they're kids, right?
yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that's what a lot of us, what we do and make mistakes is we expect more out of our kids than the age that they're at. So it's like, you got a 12-year-old and you're like, well, you know better than that. Well, really? Does a 12-year-old know better than whatever mistake they made? And so the grace part is man, there's a book I read recently, one of my favorite books. It's by Brennan Manning called All is Grace. And I don't know that I understood grace until a few years ago when I read it. And you talk about grace in a way that is eye-opening and just real. And man, it was a game changer for me in really, truly understanding grace.
And as we dig a little bit more, you're digging a little bit more into your story. Now, your father committed suicide, so that's a larger detail that had to affect you in multiple ways. How did that affect your perception of him and yourself? How did you feel about the fact that he took his life that way?
You know what? And that's a great question. That was one that I struggled with for many, many years. What a lot of people don't know is I actually found the gun that he shot himself with about 2 weeks before that. I was, again, 11 years old. I was playing around in his closet, and I come upon this gun. It was a sawed-off shotgun. And I remember thinking, ooh, this is kind of cool. 11-year-old boy, I'm like, this is cool. And within probably 30 seconds, my dad's over the top of me, and all I hear, and he had a deep voice. He's like, son, don't you ever tell anybody you found this. Now get out of here. So, I ran out of the room, and, so when all this came down, the unworthiness, the shame, the guilt, all of that, it was already bad enough to leave with my dad, but then to know that it was the gun that I never told anybody about, that was tough to swallow, right? And so for many, many years, I had that shame and unworthiness and guilt, and that's something the enemy just loves to use to, in ways that defeats us and does so much damage to us. But that was what I dealt with. And I was that guy, this young man that I felt like I was walking around and it was the scarlet letter. It was the guy, hey, everybody was whispering, hey, that's the young man whose dad committed suicide, right? And so I eventually, when I got into high school and on into college, I had to medicate this wound, this father wound of abandonment and betrayal, right? I couldn't understand how a dad could leave his family. And then, so I was very mad at God. And then I was mad at my dad too. I was mad at my dad for leaving and abandoning me. And I was mad at God for what allowing him to. That was my thinking. And so through all of that, it was a pretty big struggle as a young man. And honestly, my mom was making $7,000 a year, had 3 boys. And she was the last one I was really going to go talk to about this stuff because I knew she had her plate full to begin with. So for me, I tell people all the time, have your kids, go talk to a professional, have some kind of outlet for them, somebody they can talk to that's besides mom and dad, because they need to be able to process and walk through some of this.
That's so true. That's so good. And that's giving parents some grace because she had to figure it out. And you coming to her with that, she may not have had the answers, which would have made it even worse. So like you said, go to someone outside, go to a counselor, have that space to go to try to figure out where does your mind take this kind of process, your guilt, your thoughts couldn't have been mature enough to handle all that at 9, 10, 11 years old. There's just no way. And your story tells me that it took you about 20 years to figure out that you had this father wound, kind of sort of. I mean, it started to dawn on you. Were there signs or triggers? And are there signs or triggers that we can all look for that maybe some of us have a father wound somewhere?
Anger is probably the biggest one. I talk to men all the time, and after it's all said and done, you start getting real and authentic and honest with guys. Um, the anger is a big issue, especially with men. It's there with women too, and we can talk about how this father wound impacts both men and women differently,
Hmm.
but similarities. But the men, it's anger, and so it comes out in so many different ways. But so many guys I deal with, they're angry, but they can't even tell you why. Well, at the end of the day, so many of the times it comes back down to this father wound. And I've got a counselor friend of mine who he went up. We got to interview John Eldridge from best-selling author Wild at Heart and stuff.
Hmm.
He's in the movie,
Hmm.
and he went up with me, and he's like, we were talking on the way up, and he counsels hundreds of men and women a year. And he said, John, the reason I jumped on board to support what you're doing, he says, because after it's all said and done, doesn't matter what men and women come in for, couples, whatever, it's communication, divorce, addiction, whatever, you name it. After it's all said and done, when I start peeling back the layers, almost every time it comes back down to a father wound. He said, so I get it. And so much of that, it exemplifies itself through anger, addiction, things of that nature.
Mm, mm. That's deep. I mean, that takes that peels back the layers on so many things, and the way you expressed it in the film, which really touched me, is that after you found grace for your dad, you said, you know what, I got to figure out why he was this way. Instead of just saying, I'm so mad at you, I'm so mad you did this, I'm so mad that you weren't who you needed to be, you said, let me be a detective, let me figure out the why. And as you digged into his life, what did you find, and how did it change your perspective?
Yeah, just understanding the life that he grew up with. It God just showed me a compassion for the man that I once like literally hated, right, and was so angry with. And it was in God really walking me through that journey and showing me things in a different perspective. I believe even certain things that I just began to understand. Dude, my dad was a jacked up, wounded, and flawed dude just like me.
Hmm.
We're all imperfect, right? None of
Mm-hmm.
us are perfect, and so understanding that he came out of an environment, a family environment, that he just didn't have a clue because he didn't have that stable father figure there. That was really what helped me connect the dots and understand. And I try to encourage most men to do that. I'm leading a Bible study right now, the Father Effect small group with our church. And I've got about 6 or 7 guys in there. And it's crazy the conversations we're having and me encouraging them to go find out more about their fathers and them coming back every Sunday and what they're understanding and seeing and how God's now revealing even to them.
Mm.
You know what? My dad didn't have a chance, man. The fact that my dad even survived and made it to the age that he did is
Mm.
pretty miraculous, right? It's pretty
Mm.
miraculous. So it really is in doing some research, finding out more about your dad, which I'm sure now you're probably seeing your dad at a whole different level than you did before.
Sure, sure. And even knowing that and digging into my own life, uh, I never wanted to point blame and say, well, I'm this way because of you. But at the same time, I can see the steps that I walked and see that because he didn't show me, I ended up walking them. But I think his father didn't show him. So, I'd have to go back a couple of steps to figure out where that root started. And, there's so many fathers out there like myself that realized, hey, I was an absentee father. I went through divorces and I wasn't able to be there for my children through certain times. And, we're rebuilding our relationship as we speak because I had to go back and go, wow, I wasn't there. And you don't think about it till after the fact. And then as your relationship grows with your children, they start to tell you, hey, you weren't here for this, or I'm angry with you about that, or I'm not sure I'm happy with where our relationship is right now because you weren't here. And man, what an earth shattering revelation that is to come out and go, that was me. So me figuring that out to other people out there, what's the first step that you recommend in the healing process when the child comes to the father or and says, "Hey, you weren't here. What do we do?"
Yeah, well, the first thing in the whole process of walking through it is, as a father who's wounded their kids, it's or who has been wounded by their dad, is admitting you got a wound. Most guys won't even take that step. Most people, they don't even want to admit they got a wound because they don't really want to go there, right? They don't want to unpack a bunch of this stuff from their past. Especially men, it's a pride issue. It's like it'll somehow make me look weak or less of a man or diminish what God's doing in my life, blah, blah, blah. It's the reality of we have to admit that we're wounded. You get to that point, you're far ahead of most other people out there. The second thing is inviting God into the wound, right? Asking him to come along for the journey. The third thing is getting some type of professional counseling, which I'm a huge advocate of Christian counseling because of what it did for me. And I think you need a guide. I think Dr. Tom was that Aaron to Moses that God put in my life that helped me walk through that journey and guide me down the path when there were days I was like, I ain't going, ain't gonna happen, I'm done. But every week when I walked out the door from a counseling session, it was like, thank you, Lord. There was something God was revealing and was helping me get to that point. There was purification in the process, right? Like healing in the heartache. It's one of the toughest things I've ever done, brother. But I would do it a million times again because of what God did in my life and through me when it comes to my kids and my wife. And then the fourth step is forgiveness. It's about forgiving your father. The baggage of unforgiveness is so incredibly burdensome and heavy. I describe it like it's, I was walking around town with like 10 big hefty trash bags. That was me. That was me. And once I found forgiveness, all that was gone. And so that's the biggest piece is being able to admit it and walking through kind of those steps. But you have a child that you've wounded and they've come to you and you're trying to have a conversation with them. I think for me, one of the things I've learned is to share my own story with my kids. I've wounded my kids. I think I wound them a little less now than I used to. But because I am imperfect, they know I'm not a perfect dad, but I'm doing the best I can. And they know I love them, right? In sharing some of my story, the issues with depression and the alcohol and everything that I've gone through, being able to share those stories with my kids, it helps them see that I'm more than just dad, that I'm a flawed individual. But again, I'm doing the very best I can. And there's a connection and a bonding through those stories that comes nowhere else when it comes to a father-child relationship.
That goes into a space that that opens me up to navigate to people that have walked through divorce, like myself. When you are going through a divorce, sometimes you're the father that's leaving the wife, and you're not thinking, I'm not leaving my kids, I'm just leaving this relationship. But to the children, you're leaving them. You're leaving and going to start something else. Just like to them, it says, I wasn't enough for you to stay. I wasn't enough to make this what you needed to be or what you thought was happy or whatever that may be. And they feel abandoned. How do you begin to heal the process with a child who's walked through divorce, and where does that start?
I think it's a very similar situation. It's really having just those honest, transparent, real conversations about what's really going on, right? About it's not, I'm not abandoning you. Me and your mom just could not make it work, couldn't get along, however you want to explain it to them. But them knowing constantly that you're there for them, whether it's even if you're not there in the home, right? You're in a different place, that they know at any moment they can call you and you're going to answer the phone. You're going to do your best to answer the phone, right? It's staying in contact with them on a daily basis. It's reaching out to them, pursuing them, making sure they know that dad never stopped pursuing me, no matter what. It's a text every day. And I do this with my kids now. It's every day. And well, almost every day. Me sending them a text. Hey girl, just wanted you to know that I love you and I'm praying for you. Have a great day. It's the next day. Hey girl, hope you had a great day. I love you.
Mm,
It's sending a Bible verse. It's
mhm,
just letting them know. And my girls are very much on the text, right? Depending on
mhm.
the age of your kids and teenagers,
Yeah,
a lot
yeah.
of them don't want to talk on the phone, right?
Yeah, no one talks on the
So
phone anymore.
it's finding that groove that works for you and your kids. And I'll tell you the other thing too is the power of a letter. To sit
Mm,
down and handwrite a letter and
mhm,
pour your heart out. I tell this to people all the time that their fathers maybe are disengaged. Their fathers are still alive. They're grown people, and their dads don't think they've done anything wrong. They don't think they've wounded them. They
mhm,
think they've been the perfect father. Blah blah blah.
mhm,
But the son or the daughter is very angry and
mhm,
is trying to find that forgiveness. It's amazing what just the power of a letter can do. And I've heard story after story of a father getting a letter who was estranged, didn't want anything to do with his kid, and what God did through that situation. Because it's a written word,
mhm,
right? And a father
mhm.
reading it without having to, be defensive because of body language and in person and all that stuff. It's crazy what God can do just through writing a letter. And so, when it comes to the divorce situation, man, it's making sure that you're just staying engaged and your kids know you continue to pursue them no matter what. And I think at the end of the day, as they get older, they realize all that you've been through and what you went through, right? And again, the more important part is being able to share that honestly and openly with your kids
Mm,
so that they see that you're not perfect, you and mom and dad are not perfect,
mhm.
and that we're all flawed people.
What about some advice for the children? We talked about what the fathers need to do, but if there is a son or daughter out there that's saying, "Hey, I've got a father wound," what's the first step for them to begin the healing process?
So I think the first step is to find counseling, right? If they realize that they think, man, there's something there because my behavior is just not quite right. I understand, like in my own story, it was the drinking and, all the stuff I was dealing with, abandonment, the concern and worry and fear, and all the things that I was dealing with for many years. I knew there was just something, it wasn't right. And so my first step, once I admitted I was wounded and needed help, it was, let's see a professional, because I truly, for me, I don't think I'd be where I'm at today if it wasn't for my counselor. Um, I believe that there's so much in that professional guidance because they're trained, right? And
Mhm.
now I say Christian counselor because I believe there's a lot of counselors out there. And there's a lot of good counselors and bad counselors. Doesn't matter in what arena, whether it's secular or Christian or whatever. But I think to have a Christian counselor from a biblical standpoint, be able to kind of walk you through the journey is very, very important. So being able to kind of start unpacking some of those feelings and some of those emotions and some of the things you're dealing with, that baggage
Mm.
with a professional is a great first start. And then as you do that, I think you can then, depending on your situation, start to reach out to that father figure and just try to engage. And again, if he's very standoffish, don't want anything to do, it's, well, I'm going to write him a letter. And here's the unfortunate thing, Derek. Some men will never get it. I
Mm.
know guys that their dads to this day don't think they've done anything wrong. They've
Mm.
never gotten it. And it's sad, but it's the reality.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
The other thing is, it's not about them, though. You're not forgiving them for them,
Mm.
you're forgiving them for you
Mm.
because it's that unforgiveness that it's, I'm telling you, it will destroy you,
Mm.
right? Like my anger was coming out and seeping out in me in ways had no idea. With the
Mm.
relationship with my wife, with my kids, the short temper, the anger. I mean, I was that knucklehead. I'd be up in my office if my 2-year-old come running in. I'd start yelling at my wife downstairs. What are you doing? Get her out of here.
Mm.
In reality, it's like my 2-year-old had a attention span of maybe what, 15 seconds. If I had just played with her, she'd have been distracted and back downstairs in no time. So
Mm.
it's it's just understanding it's not about forgiving. It's not for the other person. You're forgiving for you. And that's the other part too. It's, how can we expect God to forgive us if we're not willing to forgive others?
Yeah. That is the moment that changes everybody's life.
And you know what, dude? Again, brother, it's not easy. It is a It's probably the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. For that 3 or 4 months, it was brutal. I was going to a counselor once a week. My wife was going off kickboxing. My kids were going to school. I was coming back home. I was sitting in my recliner and I was weeping. I mean, weeping, dude, broken. But it was in that process, in that true relationship and authenticity and real, honest conversation with God. Because many times I was just saying, Lord, I got nobody else. You are the only one that can help me through this. My wife's amazing and she's supportive and encouraging. But at the end of the day, it came down to between me and God. And what he showed me and revealed to me was game changing. Hey, I lost your audio, brother.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you.
I think I turned it off because my dog was going off the background. That's a live show for you. You got the dog, and that's what happens. I was saying, it's funny that you when you walk through forgiveness, what changes your life, and you feel like no one else understands, but there are a lot of people out there that are walking through what you're walking through. So we hope that those people that are listening today feel like, hey, I'm not alone. There is someone else out there that gets what I'm going through, and I can come through this somehow, some way. So I got a text down here that says my dog was saying hello on the program. So there you go. He does that often, but that's what we got with live show. Um,
Yeah. Well,
you
and,
know,
and here's what I'll say too, man, to that point. Anybody who knows me knows I'm the biggest knucklehead. I told you this. There is nothing special about me, dude. I'm a broken, flawed, jacked up, and perfect dude. If God can do this in me, He can do this in others, and so much more. And back to what we originally started with, doesn't matter. You're not alone. We're all the stories that I hear and have heard over the last 12 years from people is it's amazing. The tragic stories that God has taken and that He's made that brokenness beautiful, right? In ways that are just insane, but it's so cool.
and the movie itself hits hard on sons and fathers, but you have three daughters, and so do I. So tell me a little bit about how this affects daughters compared to sons, and the importance of dads to daughters, not just to sons.
Yeah, so the way the father wound impacts men in most cases, obviously we talked about a little bit about anger. Guys will typically pour themselves into things, right? So for me, there was a line that I used. It was either in the movie or the book. I said, I was trying so hard to prove to a man that had been dead for many years and to the world that I could make it on my own, that I could be successful. And what's interesting is you look at a lot of the incredibly successful, financially successful people, um, whether it's Steve Jobs, Barack Obama, Dennis Rodman. We did a clip that didn't make the final movie, but we released it on YouTube. It talks about each one of them, their incredible success, but yet each one of them had a father wound. And the drive in a lot of men, they want to prove their dad wrong for leaving, for abandoning them, for whatever the case is, right? They want to prove that they can do it on their own and they can be successful, and he's going to be sorry that he left. And so whether it's getting in the gym and it's the bodybuilder who wants to become the muscular guy, whether it's the CEO or the corporate guy who's just driven to no matter what, at all costs, I'm going to be successful, I'm going to rise in the ranks and whatever. That's the way it plays out a lot with guys. And of course, addiction. A lot of it, these guys fall into addiction because they're just trying to cover up the pain, and that plays itself out in many different ways. With women, one of the biggest ways is promiscuity. The girls, because they don't get that fatherly love, they're going to go look for it somewhere. We interviewed a stripper named Stephanie for the movie, and she talked about how she just craved that attention on stage when she was dancing, and she got that attention from men. And because she didn't get it from a father, that's why she ended up doing what she was doing. She talked about, another big important thing for fathers to understand here is we are a reflection of what our kids believe God to be. So For me, it was, I thought God was this guy that, well, if my dad's not worth, thinks I'm worth sticking around for, why does God think I'm worth sticking around for? Right? There's those kind of things. And Stephanie, the stripper in the movie, said, my dad and mom got divorced early on. My dad was just kind of over in another state. And she said, I just looked at God as he was just kind of over there. And if I really needed him, I would go to him. But he was just kind of over there, just like my dad. And it's that, most guys, if their dad was that military style, over the top, disciplinarian, angry guy, they think God's the same way. If he was that distant or aloof guy who, just kind of did his own thing, was maybe living right there in the home. And that's a father wound that can be even more devastating than the
Sure.
dad not living in the home or being passed, is a dad that's living right there, but chooses to do other things rather than spend time with his kids. And that's a tough thing to understand and deal with. So, a couple of different ways it affects men and women. Women also have the addiction thing, and there's a lot of angry women out there too because of their fathers and some of the things they've dealt with. But there's similarities, but in some instances there's ways that it shows itself differently with men and women.
Well, I noticed, and in the clip I just talked about, you had said that women see their beauty or feel or get their first glimpse of their own beauty by how their father talks to their mother and how he talks to them. Tell me how that has changed with your daughters, and what have you done to make sure that you show them that they're beautiful?
I do the best I can every day, or often, should I say, to hug and kiss on my girls. My youngest is still at home. My two are in college, but every time I see them, it's I try to get all my time and attention with them. With my girls, I try to make sure they understand that they're beautiful. Both doesn't come just from the outside, right? Physical, that they are incredibly beautiful on the inside. Because most of our young ladies now are dealing with the comparison issues and social media and all the junk that's out there, showing them what they're supposed to be or the standard or whatever that mess is, right? They need to know in their father's eyes that they are loved, cherished, and valued just exactly the way they are, the way God made them, no matter what that is, right? He's made them in a way that's unique and they're one of a kind. So making sure my girls understand that, giving them words of affirmation, saying, I'm proud of you, I believe in you, I love you more than you can ever imagine, right? I say that a lot with my girls. And so just making sure they understand that. And then the positive physical affection of a father, just being able to hug them in a way that's not just a side hug and all the other things. It's an embrace, a bear hug, where they know, man, dad loves me. And there's nothing they can do that will make me love them any more or any less, right? The
Yeah,
mistakes I've
yeah.
made, all the things, again, sharing my story, it does a couple of things. It helps them understand that dad's imperfect, dad's made mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes too, but I can come to him and admit it to him when I've made mistakes. And so that's been a big part of me and my relationship with my girls, and the way I love my wife. I do the best I can to hug and kiss on my wife in front of my kids, making sure it's in front of them, being intentional and purposeful in that, so that's the last thing they have to worry about when they walk out the door to go to school every day. They're not worried about, well, what's going on with mom and dad. It's, man, mom and dad love one another, right? And most of the time it's like, yeah, get a room, and they're, grossing them out.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
my youngest one, when she was younger, I'd sit and she would just have the biggest grin on her face every time I hugged on my wife in the kitchen at breakfast, and my other ones would, say whatever. But yeah, it's just walking in that daily awareness and learning. There's so many resources out there today that there weren't 10, 15 years ago, right? When I was a young father, you got the podcast, you got YouTube channels like your own, and so many different resources that back in the day, we essentially just had a book.
Yeah, yeah, that was
Right.
it. Go to the library.
So and honestly too, it's how do we get with other guys? I learned so much from other guys that have gone through some of the same stuff, or they're ahead of me in some of the things they've gone through, and just being open and honest and authentic with other guys about your own struggles, dude, that in itself is a game changer. When you have that real brotherhood, the band of brothers,
Yeah,
where you can have those conversations about this stuff, they've paid the dumb tax in many cases, right? They've already done the stupid thing and made the mistake. And for the younger guys, I'm that guy. I've paid all the dumb taxes plus some. But it's in that just daily awareness. I'll share a quick story with you, and this was an eye-opening one, and I love sharing this story. Dr. Meg Meeker, who we interviewed for the film, she tells this great story. She said, she was a pediatrician by trade. Now she's like a 6-time best-selling author, and she said, John, I started noticing these young ladies that were 13, 14, 15, 16 years old coming into my office, and they were sexually active. It started out at 16, and it started getting younger. And she said, I was really concerned because it was getting younger and younger. And she said, a couple of different occasions, I would have a young girl walk in my office. And she would say, I'd give her a physical. Everything looked fine. But before the girl would walk out of the office, she'd say, hey, Dr. Meeker, can you write me a prescription? And Dr. Meeker would say, you're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. You're perfectly healthy. And the young lady would turn to her and say, I don't care what it's for. Just write me a prescription. At the bottom of it, put cannot have sex. She said, John, what these young ladies were doing is they were having sex with these young men at young ages. It wasn't physically or emotionally pleasurable, but it was the only positive affection and attention they were getting from a man. And this prescription was their permission slip to go tell Johnny, hey, Johnny, I can't have sex anymore. As a man with 3 daughters, brother, I was running home, making sure my girls, I was doing things differently and making sure I was walking in that daily awareness.
That's powerful. That's powerful. I mean, that just blows my mind. It shocks me, but I'm not surprised that this is happening. There's so much going on in the world right now, and our daughters, our sons are suffering. So to hear that story just it saddens me, but we've got to do better. We've got to do better. And I think my first thought that comes in, as you were the father of 3, I'm the father of 3, and maybe the person that's out there is saying, hey, well, when is this going to get better if I'm trying to do better with my daughters? It takes time, right, to heal that wound with those daughters, with those sons. Give me a little bit of explanation of what the time looks like. I mean, because this isn't I just love you now, it's all better. It's going to take some time over some progression for you to actually start the healing process with those children, yeah?
Yeah, and like I said, every man's journey is different, right? And every situation is a little different. Some of the father wounds are much deeper than the others. Some of the things we've done as men have, we've done some damage, right? But it comes back down to continuing to pursue that child in whatever way you can, whether it's the phone calls, the text, the writing little notes, leaving it on the pillow at night, writing notes, put it in their car if they're teenagers and driving, just those type of things, so that they know Dad never gave up on me. No matter what, they're going to look back, and one day, hopefully, there'll be a reconciliation, and they'll know he never gave up on me. And then it's the one-on-one time. Really is amazing, the daddy-daughter dates. I love them with my girls, and I still do them. I started when they were really fairly young, at least my youngest one. And just the things they'll tell you when it's one-on-one versus family, it's crazy. The conversations I've had with my girls about sex and about all kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah.
When it's just them and you. There's no sister that they're worried about if they say something or how, whatever. It's the openness and honesty there. And then the other thing, too, I learned, one of the guys we interviewed, Neil Jeffries, a pastor at one of the big churches here in Dallas, and he talked about, he said, John, there's nothing like the power of a father praying for his child out loud in that manly fatherly voice, taking their worries and concerns to the Father on their behalf. And I remember thinking, wow, that's good.
That's amazing.
I went back to my house.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I went back to my house that night, and I said, honey, okay, prayer time at night's changing. I was the guy before that where I'd lay my girl. My girls were younger at the time. They were probably like 10, 8, and 2. And I remember, I would be that guy. I'd be patting myself on the back as I walked out every night because I thought I was like Billy Graham. The prayer was so amazing. And so I started asking my girls at young ages, hey, what can I pray for you about? Because that does a couple of different things. It shows them that I'm concerned about what they're concerned about and the worries and issues that they're having. And then it leads to additional conversation afterwards, where if they say, hey, I've got a test tomorrow, well, then it's like, hey, how can I help you prepare for the test? It's maybe I'm struggling with this friendship. Okay, how can I help you there? What's going on? So it leads to these additional conversations. One of the most powerful things that I love to do, and I used to love to do when all my girls were here, was pray for my wife in front of my kids, right? Thanking God for this incredible lady that I am so fortunate to be married to. And doing it in front of my kids out loud, praying out loud to God, and encouraging and speaking words of encouragement in life over her, and for her servant's heart, and how we're so blessed to have an incredible mom and things of that nature. Man, that's a game changer in your marriage and your relationship in general.
I love it. I love what you're giving out here. I mean, this is just great information. I hope people out there watching are taking notes. The guy is dropping wisdom here. But we're going to have to get to the end. I know you have spent so much time with us, and I sure do appreciate you just carving out a few minutes to share your story with my subscribers and people that are out there watching. When you began this ministry, did you ever consider it could go global? Because you've been all over the world with this thing. What was your mindset when this started to grow? Because a lot of this is free too, right? You don't charge for this video.
Yeah, you know what? The epidemic of fatherlessness and absent fathers was so much more massive, so much more enormous than I even thought it was at the beginning. And so for me, I'd played the pretender, the poser, the fraud, the inauthentic guy for 30 years. You know, I was the guy I wanted everybody to think I was this great Christian guy who went to church every day, every week, and read his Bible every day. I had that going at home, but I was this total different guy on the road, right? And so for me, I played that game for 30 years. And I just wanted to be open, honest, and real about my story, about my struggles, about my stuff, about my junk, so that other people, both men and women, can understand they're not alone. And we're all, broken, right? There's something in all of us that we struggle with in most all the times. And God is a forgiving, loving, trustworthy, grace-giving God. And he's the reason, I'm where I'm at and allowing me to do what I do. So for me to share my story, it was like, okay, we're getting real, and I'm not holding back. I'm not pretending anymore. What you see is what you get.
And now it's global. Everybody, I mean, you've been everywhere. And at this point, what's the next step for you? Because you've already got the book. If everybody can see the ticker down there, you can go to thefathereffect.com and hear all about the story. You can check out the book. You can check out the movie. But what's next for the ministry?
So we've got a prison ministry that we just launched, which is so cool. Matter of fact, we have our second event tomorrow. So we're showing them a 60-minute movie, talking to inmates, about 100 inmates at a time at various prisons all over Texas. We're going to probably expand that to other states as God opens the door. And what God's doing there is just so cool to be a part of that. We've got a couple other projects that we're working on, some things that could be pretty exciting. We've got one other project, I don't know from a movie standpoint, a movie project. We're looking at making a second version of The Father Effect called The Father Effect 2, Raising Godly Girls in an Ungodly World. So
that's the one that's going to be the yes. I want to
Yeah.
be on that one right there. Tell me all about it so I can figure it out. I'm right there.
Yeah, and really it's going to be a similar story in that we're going to get real and talk about the issues that daughters and girls have, the over-sexualization, the comparison, them valuing their worth by the number of likes they get on Instagram, sex, alcohol, peer pressure. We're going to dig into all that and hopefully help dads navigate those waters and help them have such a more deeper, closer relationship with their kids, the girls.
That's just incredible. I've got some comments out here that Jason Perry said that what you talked about has such a huge influence on the children when you're loving your wife the way you do, when you're sharing and being close to them and being able to pray with them every day. Those things have a huge influence on your children. So what an amazing statement that would be. And then Beth Floyd said that your story and your ministry is so needed for everyone. And we will do what we can to share, start the healing for so many people out there, because its story just, it needs to be told over and over and over again. And like you and I talked about before we started, this thing is way beyond us. This is God's thing, trying to reach out to people and trying to bring healing to so many people that are hurting. And if you never knew you had a wound, watch this story. You might be surprised that your reactions to certain things, the way you've lived your life, the way you deal with your friends, coworkers, family, might be coming from a wound that you didn't even know was there. Right, John?
Yeah, absolutely. And it could be so simple too, Derek. I'll tell you, for me, for many years, it was like not being able to repair the flapper on a toilet. When the flapper broke, right? It would be my
Yeah.
wife would, and before kind of all this happened, my wife would expect me to get all these things repairs done. Well, it wasn't that I didn't want to do them. It was like I didn't have the confidence that I knew what
Yeah.
I was doing.
Yeah.
And so I would find myself in the middle of trying to do something simple that I thought every man should be able to do and know how to do. And I'd be getting mad and angry at my dad, who had been dead for who knows how many years, because he wasn't there to help me or teach me. And so it plays itself out in so many different ways. But I do truly want everybody to understand and know, back, and I've said it a couple of times, it doesn't matter what you've done, the mistakes you've made. Man, we have a God that is waiting with open arms, just ready to say, welcome home, and ready to help you become that parent, that mom, that dad that he created you to be. And just know you're not alone. You're never alone.
Well, thank you, John, for taking the time. You have shared an incredible story, and I hope everyone that's watching out there can push the share button for someone maybe you didn't know that could be able to feel encouragement or inspiration from this story. And as we said, as you see the ticker down there, go to fathereffect.com to get more information. And John, what can we do for you, man? I don't know if there's any more questions out there. I don't see if there's tons of people asking questions, but it could be. You never know. Anybody else have any questions before we jump off? Usually we have a couple people in the audience that may have something they can throw up there, but a couple of comments have come through, but I think everybody has probably watched it and said, okay, I get it. That says, no truer
Well,
words have been spoken. We are never alone. That was from Jason Perry. He came in and said that for you. So,
Derek, I appreciate you doing this, dude. That the reality of this can be a pretty heavy thing for a lot of people, and that's why I try to just make sure they understand. Man, look, there's a happy ending,
yeah.
right? There was a happy ending to my story, and there can be a happy ending to your story. No matter what you've been through, no matter how your father wounded you, there's hope, and God can do amazing, miraculous things in so many people's lives. And the reality of it too is it's not just about us, right? It's about the generations to come.
Yeah.
It's about our kids, our grandkids, our great grandkids, and our willingness to break the cycle and step forward now and take those steps and say, you know what, this generational curse stops here. From now on, this is done, and we're going to start a new legacy.
And it stops right here, right now. You hear it out there, guys. It stops right here, right now, today. So as we close out, man, we just want to say thank you to everybody that came to visit us today. And if you did enjoy this content, do me a favor and hit that share button so people can check it out. And we want to see you again here at the Beautiful Now podcast, Beautiful Now Live, every Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. We're bringing you something new, something to encourage you, uplift you, and inspire you. And if you enjoyed the content today, let us know. Put it in the comments. We'd love to hear from you again. Thanks for taking the time, everyone. We appreciate you. God bless. We'll see you next time.